Hey, good Thursday afternoon. Scott Luton, Jamin, and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Gentlemen, do you know what today's theme is?
Nope.
Pop quiz right off the bat.
hot takes, right? This is going to be like the ESPN show. Who's gonna do the points on?
Yeah, that's right.
It is Hot Take Thursday here at Supply Chain Now, and we're all going to be continuing our work to increase your supply chain IQ, and we're going to touch on it all today, from transportation to tech to the vaccine distribution and a lot more. So stay tuned, buckle up. And not only are we welcoming in our panel's takes on what's going on in the world, but want to hear yours as well.
Yeah.
So y'all get ready to contribute. Quick programming note before we get started here. Of course, if you enjoyed today's live stream, be sure to search for Supply Chain Now, wherever you get your podcast from. Click subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. And we'd love to welcome you in on future live streams every week. Monday, Thursday, 12 noon is this currently standing live streams. And of course, like yesterday's Greg and like tomorrow's Greg, we have a lot more to offer as we try to really serve as the voice of global supply chain. All right.
Are we standing? Because it looks like Jamin might be standing, but I'm sitting, just to be clear.
I'm not. I'm just trying to look eager. I'm trying to stand
you
up.
You look really tall, man. I like it. Seriously.
Well, let's
go Royals.
Yeah.
Go Royals.
Hey, got to represent KC.
That is right. You know, we touched on Kansas City and Buck O'Neil in a recent This Week in Business History.
Really enjoyed that episode.
Well, I appreciate that, Jamin. You know, you've heard Buck O'Neil 1,000 times if you're a sports fan, a baseball fan. And I got to tell you, I didn't fully appreciate the legacy behind what Buck O'Neil did in industry and for so many things. So y'all got to check out that episode, This Week in Business History. But what we want to do, let's say hello to a few folks, Jamin and Greg, and then we've got a couple of resources we want to share, and then we're going to dive right in. So we're going to move quick here on this Thursday afternoon. Josue Ramos is back, the podcast star. Really have enjoyed him sharing all of his POV across the digital stratosphere here lately. Pratik, great to have you. Always a pleasure to have you on our live streams. Sony. From Nigeria. I think that he may be at least first time I've seen him here.
Yeah.
Great to have you.
Off, first time.
Welcome.
Look forward to you. Of course, Mike Avra, who is a constant voice, especially when it comes to supply chain finance. It seems is one of his.
I think we need a new hashtag, Hire Mike, right? We had a Hire Ben hashtag, right?
Agreed.
I think Mike is open. Let's call it open to new employment. Don't tell the boss.
Yes. Well, great to have you here, Mike Avra. Mervin, of course, great to have you, Mervin. As always, Rich Brown. Enjoyed you popping in on our live streams. Tom Raftery. Tom, we're looking forward to you and Alexis joining Greg and I on the sustainability focused. How do we put it? Sustainability matters. Kind of an update on what's going on, as long as a lot of Q&A from the audience. So look forward to you joining us tomorrow, Tom. Daniel Hartnett, one final one here, says, hello, everyone. Another day, supply chain info packed session. Daniel, appreciated your commentary yesterday on our special Veterans Day episode. And one final, Gary Smith, fresh off the keynote circuit, has got his latest supply chain management review publication we're going to touch on here at the end. So, Gary, great to have you with us.
Listen up, Gary.
That's right. Listen up. All right. So we're going to make these commercials very brief and painless. They're not really commercials. We're really giving folks an opportunity to, strengthen their supply chain IQ. Here, we've touched on this before, Greg. It's all about IoT. IoT's been around forever. Bob with Open Text is going to give us some of the latest cutting-edge applications of IoT in industry. November 19th, that's just a week from today. Make sure you sign up. We've got the link in the show notes. Greg, one last comment from you.
Later in this episode, you're going to hear why you ought to care about IoT and then make your decision on joining that.
That's right. Everyone's got a decision to make. And then finally, 2020 SAPICS virtual conference, not just another webinar. Achieving perfect 2020 supply chain vision. Don't we all wish we had that? And Greg and I, beyond sharing some of our latest observations from the world of supply chain leadership in particular, trivia's back. Hashtag trivia's back should make several folks around here kind of happy. We're big. I'm big. I'm a big trivia nerd. So, all right. So, Jamin and Greg, great to have you here on the live stream. Really excited about what we're going to be tackling here today. Greg, I think you are going to lead off with our first hot take, right?
Yes. And, just so everyone knows, not necessarily news. These are just takes on what's going on in the marketplace. And this, as a critical disclaimer, you may or may not hear some opinion here. So, as many of you know, I follow and participate in supply chain startups and investment in supply chain technology in particular. And it just struck me over the course of the last few weeks that there has been a ton of activity relative to supply chain technology, more than I have seen in this condensed time period. So E2Open has announced that they're going public. LlamaSoft got bought by Coupa. Whether you like or hate that deal, Laura Ciceri hates that deal. I'm speaking for. She's not a huge fan of that deal.
Greg,
because of her concerns around it.
She said that it actually literally brought her to tears when she first saw it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We're going to get to hear from her on that because she's going to be on Corinne's show, correct?
That's right. Tech Talk.
Yeah, she's going to be on Tech Talk. So we're going to get to hear about that. Ryder opened a $50 million venture capital fund, and they're not the first, but specifically focused on supply chain techs. And I'm hearing and experiencing startups that are getting a 30x revenue valuation. So just to give you an idea, that's a $1 million company valued at $30 million.
Wow.
I mean, that is incredible by any standard in technology. That is unicorn type numbers. So we're seeing not only activity, but enthusiasm. As some of you probably know, I've recently become a venture partner at a venture capital firm specifically to seek out supply chain technology companies to invest in. And there are some amazing ones out there. And there is a ton of activity, and there is a ton of money on the sidelines. More funds coming, by the way, focused specifically on tech. And it is incredible what we're seeing in supply chain.
So, two quick comments. First, Mike Aver says unicorns all over, and then Daniel is kind of playing the role of Malcolm here. Daniel says that her later comments on LlamaSoft actually gave it a thumbs up. Speaking of Laura Ciceri.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, I think the important recognition here is there, and Mike is right. There are unicorns all over the place. We're used to seeing unicorns in consumer tech or fintech, financial technologies, or, a bazillion others, healthcare technologies and that sort of thing. But this is a very unique time. Right. In supply chain technology. I mean, supply chain technology has been considered a laggard in terms of technology, a laggard in terms of innovation, and certainly a laggard in terms of valuation. If you look at the tequila supply chain tequila sunrise supply chain tech stock index. I have got to shorten the name of that, which you can't do yet, though we're working on it, but I can. You see a lot of companies you would not consider innovative or forward-looking. Coupa, up until now, would be considered one of those. But we're starting to see some incredible companies go public and incredible companies start to come into their own in terms of valuation in these times. Look, COVID, #COVID happened, right? And that changed the game for supply chain. It's not that supply chain is doing anything substantially different. It's just the recognition by the greater marketplace.
Yep. So, and of course, Jamin, with your point of view and your expertise in logistics and transportation, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing exactly what Greg's seeing, especially in that component of global industry.
Yeah, I think Greg said it well. And what we're seeing is two things converge. We were already going through a lot of change things were adapting. We're moving to a new way of consuming goods and delivering them. And then the hashtag COVID happened. And those two things just, exponentially accelerated change, adoption, all that. And we're really in a adapt and thrive time, or adapt and die, if you want to.
Yeah, don't adapt and die, right? Yeah.
So couple quick comments from the audience. So David's talking about the Coupa deal, still thinks it's going to be too big, too fast. And then Mervin is referring to your index. Greg says, yeah, that's not going to fit on a t-shirt. So great to have.
Depends on the size of t-shirt. We're going to sell it in triple XL only.
That's right. All right. So so much going on there. And Greg, I know you're just scraping the tip of the iceberg. If folks want to learn more, especially a lot of what Greg mentions, be sure to check out Tequila Sunrise. You can subscribe to that wherever you get your podcast from. Greg, is it okay to move to our next segment here as we dive deeper into transportation?
Yeah, well, one final comment, and that's in regards to Jamin's industry, his focus on transportation. We saw a lot of movement in freight tech even prior to COVID. A lot of it was irrational exuberance. The freight in freight tech was in all capital letters, and the tech in freight tech was in tiny, tiny font because it was more about freight than tech. And that actually delayed the impact. It's obviously impacted freight tech companies in this year, but it also delayed the impact on supply chain in general, other aspects of supply chain tech, because that was a bit of a bust. I mean, right. SoftBank made a couple of really, really dumb investments, and that can actually set back an industry. But the good news is the industry appears to be recovering, and freight tech seems to be raising the size of the font in tech on freight tech.
That is a really good point. I think a lot of even this tech, it has been around, but its adoption is where the choke point has come into. And we in transportation logistics have probably all been guilty of this one time or another. We have tech or new way of doing things, but then and we tout it and talk about it and show everyone. But then behind the scenes, we dive right back into an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So yes. I think this is really one of the things that's really driving not just innovation. Surely don't want to discredit that, but adoption and people's either willingness or just have to adopt.
Have to is often what it takes to create adoption. Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jamin, before we dive a little deeper, I want to feature this comment from Tim Bushway in St. Louis. He says, Coupa has a very careful strategy of adding in technology to their existing platform. They would not have made this purchase without a solid plan.
An excellent point. And IBM has had a solid plan for every acquisition they've ever made,
right?
And still vaporized the company. I mean, a lot of it is whether your plan is any good. I don't doubt that Coupa's plan is any good. Regardless, David, there is hope. Trust me, there is hope. And if Laura Cecilia is coming around on it, then I feel even better feeling good about this.
Well, Greg,
I agree with Tim that a company has to have a plan, and every company does have a plan when they make an acquisition.
Right, but the wiring execution is I mean, the best plan in the world, right?
Cultural integration is the most difficult thing in any kind of acquisition.
Yeah. Mike Tyson has a great quote about having a plan, right?
That's right.
So yeah.
We've been using that all year.
Yes. So there was a great Facebook collage of some of his greatest knockouts, and my buddy Neil Shaw, who may be listening, shared it, and it really took me back to the late 80s, early 90s, when he was the baddest person on the face of the earth. And folks, there was a vibe about every fight, and him walking to the ring. It was just such a iconic sports moment. So anyway, but I love that. We're gonna keep using that quote.
Seconds in boxing.
Yes, right? Yes. Michael Spinks was on there. A lot of his other great fights. But anyway, so Jamin, we got to keep driving for the sake of today's live stream, and y'all keep comments, keep it coming. That's right. No pun intended, Jamin. But let's dive into transportation.
All right. So something that's been it kind of came on very quickly and almost in in murmurs and still is a little unclear is Stop the Tires 2020. It's something we started hearing about late last week, just early this week, a driver strike. And diving in a little deeper, it was supposed to be a strike on Veterans Day, yesterday, the 11th, and then, so I don't get the dates wrong, November 26th through 29th, so essentially Thanksgiving weekend. And, it was, as so many things in transportation and logistics, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to any of us into it, there's so many different corners and pockets, and getting us all together and moving in one direction in a clear message is so tough. So it's not surprising that when news of some strike came out, it was very disorganized, and a lot of the drivers I'd talked to never even heard of this. But now, so through Facebook and I don't mean this as a joke, TikTok, some of the largest trucker owner-operator communities are on a TikTok and Facebook.
Wow.
So this is kind of my hot take, but a lot of times drivers, owner-operators get blamed, if you will, for our industry being a laggard in technology and adoption. And I say, I don't know, because they're pretty hip and savvy with social and other tech. So
right.
I think there's more to it. I don't want to put it at the feet of the drivers. But yeah, so they are now saying they have they're very active on Twitter. The Facebook group has over 25,000 members. And the first murmurs among brokers, at least, was, oh man, why are they striking about broker transparency or about rates? That tends to be where we go to all of a sudden, rates, or what are fuel rates? But this is a political kind of movement or call to action related around potential anti-fracking laws and legislation from the Biden administration. And so that's where it's kind of unique in that
a preemptive strike, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and
Wow.
so, and that's where I think some of the murkiness and the unclearness comes from. But why I think it was of note, it's interesting, and just looking back at the EQ side of things, I think we're seeing drivers, and I'll use that term broadly, drivers start to use their voice to talk about things outside of simply rates and fuel or capacity. We tend to put them in that box, and this isn't to get political or say their movement is good, bad, or indifferent. It is just interesting to see this is one of the first strikes that we've really heard about. That's and this is how they're expressing it, to save 19 million jobs related to the fracking industry. So talking to different ones across the industry, among shipper, carrier, broker, we don't expect it to truly be impactful in capacity like that. But it is interesting to start hearing drivers, and when you get into the 20,000s plus on a community, that's there's something to try to understand there, and to hear them talking about jobs as opposed to rates or fuel. I think it's sort of they're learning to communicate with us, and I think we do need to listen in a sense to understand and see them as more than just a rate or a fuel surcharge.
Well, I can tell you that this is common in Europe and Latin America and Argentina a few years ago. And I think Brazil also, they just completely shut down the country. I mean, not only would not roll trucks to carry goods, but they were blocking the roads with trucks. So that, we're talking about a group of people that have not only the greatest number, but the largest vehicles on the road. So if they decide to take an action, I mean, they can definitely have an impact. That's an interesting, seriously, it is kind of a preemptive strike, if you will.
Here's the deal.
Dynamic, but I see naturally where it would come from if they've been seeing what's going on in Europe and Latin America.
Sure.
We gotta, it is great to see more professionals, supply chain practitioners, you name it, find that voice and share that voice. And that's so important. So looking forward to seeing, the rumored aspect of all this, kind of that ambiguity, Jamin, has been interesting to kind of monitor and keep the finger on the pulse.
It won't
all
take
right.
long to pull that momentum together in this day and age with
That's right.
with
Good
social
point.
media, as Jamin was talking about.
That's a good point. Mervyn Daniel says, "Hey, it's drizzling in Dublin, and I'm outside watching this episode just for what it's worth." Awesome. Tom really
Do you
enjoyed
need to
your
announce that it's drizzling in Dublin this time of year, Mervyn?
That's a given, right?
Tom
That's
likes
Tom.
yeah, IBM reference there.
Oh,
Dave,
he had to love that.
Yeah. David says he's not scared. He's willing to bet his wallet that Laurent knows more than he does. Let's see here. We've got Mike says that let me go back to an earlier comment here. Mike says driver strike happened in Brazil back in summer of 18. It completely messed up our supply chain with similar effects that we see today with COVID. That is interesting comment there.
It was in Brazil then, yeah.
Yep. And then Mike says you're absolutely correct for Brazil, Greg. And then Tom says French truckers
yes,
are really good at this.
That's right. Yep.
So, all right. So before we switch over to a hot topic, Jamin, any final thoughts on this first, on your first POV here?
No, just that I don't think it'll cause major disruption, but I do think, drivers and all of us really, right, are learning new forms of communicating at scale. So it's interesting to see that evolve and develop. And I'd encourage the response from all of us. And really, I'm saying this to challenge myself, is just to be listening, not to immediately have a visceral reaction one way or another based on what our personal business or opinions are, but to listen and see if we can try to understand where we're all coming from.
Yeah,
like that. Appreciate that perspective. Thanks for all the great comments. Lots of interesting sidebar conversations,
including C.W. McCall would be proud. For people who don't know, look up C.W. McCall and Convoy.
Yes. Hey, we'll see if we can't get Malcolm on that. We'll see.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what is the supply chain dive's hottest story right now, hottest trending story. I think Greg had mentioned he had put this on social media before, which is probably what made it the number one trending story, Greg. Tongue firmly planted in cheek there.
I should hope so.
So a couple of, and this comes from Matt Leonard over at Supply Chain Dive. Great article.
Really thorough article.
Yep. So we're going to give you just a couple of quick highlights here. First off, as we all perhaps know, we're still waiting for official FDA approval, which should take place as expected by early December. But once approved, here's a couple numbers for you. 12 trucks rolling per day from Pfizer's formulation and fill facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan. 20 planes taking flight globally every single day. Pfizer has identified no additional logistics partners beyond DHL, FedEx, and UPS. And from a volume standpoint, they expect to make as much as 50 million vaccine doses in 2020, right? In a few weeks. However, it's 2 doses per person, so that's roughly 25 million folks.
Right.
For 2021 full year, they're projecting up to 1.3 billion. And the effectiveness so far, which is very encouraging, 90% effective rate so far at preventing COVID-19 versus a placebo. So all that's good news and very uplifting. However, let's kind of shift gears here. Here in the States, the federal government, which was reported a month or so ago, had chosen McKesson to lead distribution of the vaccine. They called it Operation Warp Speed, right? Was that federal government
I like that
framework. But did you know, Jamin, I didn't really realize this, Pfizer had opted out of Operation Warp Speed, and amongst the likely reasons, there's several, is just the cold storage requirements. We're talking minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, and of course, by using, kind of going outside and going non-direct, you've got, as we all know, you got points where you could raise the spoilage and average spoilage. If you want to look at typical spoilage rates for other vaccines during transport, this is a great factoid from the article, 5 to 20%. So
wow.
The cold storage requirements are intense. And then one final thing, the article mentions specific supply chain infrastructure constraints like reefer transportation, which right now is really tackling high demand in produce and foods. So we're going to tackle this noble mission. There's going to be some gaps, just like always uncover with any new supply chain rollout, especially one at this
Scale.
Yeah, thank you. This scale, and of course, not to be too dramatic, but this is a top priority. So much good stuff here. The reporting, Greg, to echo your comments, is outstanding. The visibility on this is probably more than folks would expect. So really, we'll see what happens when things start to roll here, second week perhaps of December. Greg, I know you're chomping at the bit. We've talked a lot about this in recent months as the vaccine game plan started to come together. Quick thought there.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things. One is the last article we discussed, they were talking about security decoys and things like that. It's interesting that they identified the point of origin for the shipments. And the other thing that's interesting, and you have to read between the lines here, there are no other main logistics supply chain partners beyond those three big carriers, because the U.S. government, the Army, was expected to participate in that. In fact, I think on 60 Minutes Sunday, they were talking to an Army general, and they asked him explicitly, are you ready to distribute this vaccine? And he said unequivocally yes, but it appears that they will not be participating in that. Another, I think, important point is the government was only hoping for 50 to 70%, let's just say 60% effectiveness. And Pfizer was targeting over 90%, and they were disappointed with 90%. I mean, one of their lead researchers was disappointed with 90%, but I think that's an incredible, that's just an incredible accomplishment. It's a bit of a misnomer, by the way. They did receive some funding from the Warp Speed program, but they did not sign the document or whatever. So there's a little bit of a misnomer there. But in any case, that none of that is material. I think Tom Raftery made a good point, and that is that, there you go. You were way ahead of me.
Well, this echoes a point you've made. I mean, this echoes a point you've been making for months.
Yeah. But the good news here is that we know who is affected by this. We know people with comorbidities over 65, especially over 85, are highly affected by this. And 77% of the deaths for COVID-19 occur for a small portion of the population, and no deaths have occurred in 77% of the population. So it's relatively easy to target this at the most vulnerable people, though the numbers are small. That's better than nothing, which is what we had before. So
right, it reminds me of that invasion from Mars Attacks with Jack Nicholson. There's a great moment there where Congress has been destroyed by the alien, and he goes, we've lost Congress, I'm paraphrasing, but we still have 2 out of 3 working branches of government, and that ain't bad. It's just a great moment right there in that movie. All right, so Jamin, we got a couple comments I want to recognize, but what's a quick take from you, especially from that, from what you're seeing distribution wise?
As a supply chain, logistics, and transportation nerd, this is going to be fascinating to watch play out. And while the vaccine isn't exact science, and the transportation and distribution will not be, it might be a little messy. I am supremely confident in us as an industry, because even though we can be a little squirrely and hard to wrangle sometimes, this is exactly the time where supply chain, logistics, and transportation folks shine, because we can really flex up and get things done when there's a lot of unknowns like no other industry. So it'll be exciting. We're really getting our at bat again for the second time in 2020.
Excellent comments, Jamin. Excellent comments. We're going to rise to the challenge. We're going to knock this out. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to come with its lumps like any other thing, but we got a knack for getting it done, and thankful to all those outstanding global supply chain practitioners and leaders. I want to share a couple of comments here. Daniel says, current focus on the vaccine supply chain needs to also focus on the risks across the end supply chain: theft, tampering, cybersecurity, data privacy, regulatory, you name it, it's there, sadly. Great point.
Yeah.
Jim Benton.
I can't speak to focus, but I can speak to awareness.
Yeah.
And they definitely have the awareness of that.
Great
The X
point.
factor being rogue governments.
Yes.
Nobody can really overcome that. Once the goods cross into a bad government's borders, all bets are off.
Well, and then to that point, you've got, we all live here in the States. We're going to be tracking that and the distribution here in States. But to your point, Greg, truly serving the world, you're going to have some regional challenges that are unique to some. So it'd be really interesting to see how this plays out, especially access and accessibility, which is important.
Right.
Jim Benton says M-Trax from Military Sustainment Brigade can add reefer capacity. Undoubtedly, they're going to be leveraging military assets. Keith Duckworth is giving us a little trivia. We mentioned Kalamazoo. Great city, he says. The name is a Native American name, meaning boiling pot or boiling water, named because the natives saw the Kazoo River in the morning with the fog rising. That is a cool trivia factoid. Cool.
Iroquois.
I don't know who. So we're going back here with this comment back to the earlier conversation around Koopa. And I don't know who mentioned this, so maybe Amanda or Clay, if you could drop this in the comments. Agree on the IBM reference. This listener says it's about track record. IBM has acquired and struggles to incorporate tech into a suite. Koopa has had a decent track record for incorporating technology that they acquire.
Yeah, and they've been really aggressive in the last 12 months too. So.
Yep. And so here coming back forward, and hey, these are winding conversations. Pratik asks what essentially is the $1 trillion question. I mean, it is a core concern related to the distribution of the vaccine beyond all the other concerns. And that's the transportation at negative 70 degrees Celsius, which I think the article we referenced, Greg, it mentioned 3 different temperature ranges based on a couple of different factors. But
right.
What's y'all's take? I mean,
have you seen some of the let's call them boxes to transport that Pfizer had developed in unison with developing the vaccine to keep it at temp, which I think is very fascinating. So innovation from all sides, not just accepting that, hey, this would have to go on a refrigerated truck, but what can we do beyond that? And I really think that's a fascinating development there.
Yeah.
As you said that, Jamin, I was imagining 53-foot reefers packed full of Yetis, right?
Hey, whatever it takes to get it done, right?
Seriously, though, the vacuum dual wall vacuum type container is a viable solution for keeping things at temp, right?
Yeah,
so
good point.
That may be just simply an augmentation of regular reefer because there's all sorts of levels of cold chain logistics.
Yeah.
Zero, sub-zero, super sub-zero, or whatever, sub-zero, whatever they call it. And they're going to have to make provisions because I can't believe that there is enough, even with food service, using food service capacity. Can't believe there's enough sub and sub-zero capacity out there. Although if it does come out in dribs and drabs, as Tom was talking about, then it could be a lot easier to carry than we think. And it is relatively small sized to a lot of the other product that is stored at zero and sub-zero.
Yeah, the patent they have, it's an interesting box to transport it to. To your point, it's a little smaller self-contained box that I think will really lend to controlling the temp and making it, I misuse the word easier, but easier to transport.
Sure.
Agreed. So no shortage. We're looking forward to this. This is going to be an incredible business case study, supply chain case study for decades to come. So we'll all be watching it roll out. So let's keep driving. There's a lot of comments I couldn't quite get to, including a few. Sometimes our platform, when it connects with social, we don't have access to the profile. So that's when we share a comment and the picture and the name's not there. So we try to attribute quotes as often as we can. So y'all keep the comments coming. Greg, we are going to move right along into the wonderful world of artificial intelligence. Tell us more.
Well, as long as we're doing hot takes, right? I wanted to talk about the technologies that are being discussed these days and how they're being deployed. We're not going to go into great detail here, but look, everyone has heard AI, IoT, robotics, blockchain. We've been talking a lot about the applicability and the real practical applications of these technologies. In fact, we just dropped episode 21 of Tequila Sunrise. Here's a little shameless self-promotion, where we talked to Kevin L. Jackson, and he is a blockchain and cloud technology expert from way back. So he talks a lot about digital transformation and blockchain in particular. But I think the important thing to recognize when you think about these technologies is that they are real. They are being used today, and they're not necessarily what you think. I mean, if you think about it, a wireless gaming device that's internet enabled, that is IoT, right? Your probably Samsung refrigerator that can tell you it's time to buy more milk, that's IoT. Your car that is communicating, especially if you have a Tesla, your car that is constantly communicating with the manufacturer to let you know the status of the vehicle, that's IoT. There are real and significant applications. Even light bulbs are IoT now, and all of those things can tell us things about how to facilitate supply chain activity, planning, transactions, that sort of thing. And there's some other things I think are worth clarifying. AI, for instance, we think AI is the replacement of human intelligence, or as I call it, the other AI, actual intelligence.
I like that.
But AI is more like your children than it is like Hal, right? It is learning from us or learning from data constantly, and it is effectively a child that has to be taught things. AI does not come out of the box, and this has been a myth that has hamstrung some large companies because they didn't understand what AI was about. AI has to learn. It has to learn about the specific circumstance, and in fact, it can be wrong. And what I've recently discovered, I did not realize this, is that AI can receive the same inputs of data, and in an early stage of learning, it might give two different answers, just like you might if you're just learning how to do math, right? What's 2 times 3? 6. What's 3 times 2? I don't know, because nobody's ever told me that before. I mean, it's simple things like that that we have to think about. So these are not end-all, be-all types of technologies, but they are coming. They are coming fast, and it is inevitable that they will be included. And one that robotics, of course, is one. Robotics and automation and autonomy I kind of put those into similar categories. Those are inevitable for a number of reasons. Robotics inevitable because the largest generation in the history of Earth is leaving the workforce at the rate of 10,000 per day. And the next largest generation isn't big enough to replace them and doesn't want to do the work that baby boomers have done.
Yep.
Autonomous, Jamin, I'm not going to make any friends in your industry, but it is inevitable that autonomous will take over the transportation industry. Planes already fly themselves. Pilots only take off and land aircraft. Ships drive themselves, have for centuries actually had autopilot or auto navigation. And trucks will do likewise. Now, we can talk about how that will come to be, how long till that comes to be, and when it comes to be, what will it be like? Which, by the way, I'd like to toss this out there for your consideration, Jamin. I think that trucking will become much like shipping, wherein there is a harbor pilot, someone who knows the treacherous streets of Los Angeles or Atlanta or Chicago or Dublin, who can shuttle that vehicle to its final destination, but autonomy will drive it largely on the long run parts of the road.
Who's going to send the memo to my knees?
Because robots don't get tired. What's that?
Who's going to send the memo to my knees to relinquish control of the steering wheel? That when autonomous I've gotten really good at navigating the highways and
Gosh, I don't
byways.
want to know that. See, that's why autonomous. That's why autonomous is inevitable. Is too many people driving
Just
with
saying. Just saying.
Or
Hey.
or while watching this show. If you're watching this show,
so you're inspiring a ton of comments here, and Jamin, we'll get you to weigh in here momentarily and respond before we move to the next segment. But our great friend Syed, IoT is everything nowadays, especially in home, like smart homes, etc. Excellent point, and he also enjoys this topic in particular. Syed, you're going to have to share your podcast program with our comments here. We'd love to have you weigh in.
I appreciate the deference, but just Greg is good.
Okay. Yes, I'm with you. Now, Tom gives you a great example, an application of IoT here. So his son's blood sugar monitor is IoT. He's a type 1 diabetic. It measures his blood sugar levels once a minute and sends that data to a personal private health cloud. Personalized medicine, outstanding. That's where we're headed. And let's see here.
Also a gamer.
So right? Daniel's got that's
dual
right.
connected with his game and his IoT device.
Yep. Mike says he's interested to see IoT, AI, and 3D printing, how it's all going to fit together going forward. In particular, I would add in healthcare. So much opportunity there. And we're going to touch on that with one of the stories towards the end of today's live stream.
Can I make one quick point on AI? And AI is sometimes these technologies can be misused or unnecessarily used. AI is a good example of where in the supply chain in particular, there are deterministic factors that you don't need AI to learn because, for instance, when I was ordering goods, if I wanted a case of oil, which is 12 cans in a case, I had to order a pallet of oil, 1,440 cans on a pallet. So I don't need AI to guess for my manufacturer or for me what I'm going to order when I need to order, because that is a deterministic calculation. So it's more of the ethereal, more of the vague or intuitional type discussions, type decisions that are made in supply chain where AI comes into play. If you're out there building AI solutions, I would encourage you to figure out whether you're dealing with a deterministic aspect or an intuitional aspect, or
nice
other scientific terms are for it.
Nice. All right. So we're 45 minutes in. Jamin, let's hit your topic, and then we're going to do a roundup.
Absolutely. So I'm talking about big bad Amazon, as someone called them. I thought this was interesting. This week there was a slide that had gone viral from a presentation that venture firm Social Capital was sharing, giving insight on how Amazon, through their history, has taken their every major cost and turned it into a source of revenue. And the light is shining right now on their transportation services. So they started in 2015 to try to take more of that in-house, as it was one of their biggest expenses. In 2019, there's an interesting stat in this article. It's from thehustle.co. I invite you to check it out. Short little article. So in the first 9 months of 2020, Amazon shipping costs amounted to $40 billion with a B, and they give some a reference point. 2019 FedEx's revenue for 2019 was $70 billion. So it gives you some insight of just how large of a player. Like, we all know they're a large player, but that is huge, right? Mm-hmm. So they've handled 2/3 of their middle mile line haul this year so far, which again is a big chunk. And now they are looking to offer those services external. And they have identified a goal to be a top 5 transportation provider. They started in April on the East Coast doing some moves, and now they're expanding in North America, going nationally. So it'll be interesting to see that develop. Now, some people will have a response that, oh man, Amazon's coming and we're screwed. And I think that that could, not to oversimplify it, but maybe that would be an appropriate response if we aren't willing to adapt and see this as a chance to be pushed a little bit. Because one thing, we can debate all day about different sides of Amazon and how they've executed, but they execute on what they set out to do, and they really are beholden to a consistent and good customer experience. And I think as an industry, we at times have not been the strongest in paying attention to both a consistent and a solid customer experience. Yeah. So I think this can be an opportunity and a reminder for us all to be pushed and to take some of this tech and things like why are we using it or why are we not using it, and what does it ultimately do, if anything, for the customer. And so not to be over idealistic, but I do believe that those who take this approach is a good push, because Amazon's coming one way, whether it's a true success or not, we can debate, right? But they're coming to play. They're here. And I think we can use this to really be reminded of that customer experience in areas where we can get better ourselves as different providers in this space.
Love that. And Jamin, feel free to be over idealistic. I love that. It's so important.
It's not idealism when you're talking about Amazon. They can do anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, on that note, so as you were sharing, Jamin, I was trying to grab those graphics and share it right here in the live stream, and my lack of skills prevented me. So what I did is we dropped the link to the article that you're speaking to in the comments, so folks can check that out. Really interesting stuff there. All right, so much going on. Every time we wrap up one of these live streams, 7 new stories pop into my brain. Oh, we should talk about this and that and this. You can never get it all in. And that's part of the beauty of global supply chain. There's really something for everybody. So what we want to do in this final segment, we're going to go through 3 really quick hitters, and just to share a couple of pieces of content with folks, a couple of points of view that I found interesting, at least. The first one is all about Vietnam. If we've heard Vietnam mentioned once, we've heard it mentioned 1 million times, right? Probably going back 18, maybe 2 years. Well, this article that comes to us from Greg, check my pronunciation. Is it Nikkei Asia?
Nikkei.
Thank you. I knew I'd put the wrong emphasis on the wrong label.
Right.
So this article, I always know when Amanda gets tickled when I hear her from her office around the corner. So is Vietnam, the question they're asking here, is Vietnam ready for a slew of new manufacturing business? Because it's there and it's a lot more is coming. So Vietnam is poised to be the fastest growing economy in the world, right around the corner. But there's been some concerns and constraints that have come to the surface. Workforce, vetted suppliers. We've all known the concern of that here in the last 12 months or so. And then land. But Vietnam is determined. I like this phrase here. They've really rallied around this phrase, quote, build the nest to welcome the eagles. I love that. That's some idealistic, positive thinking.
That's a cool way to say build it and they will come. I like that.
That's right. Another baseball reference there. Great movie. What was the name of that movie, Greg?
What?
Build
It Will Come.
Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams. Yes. Thank you very much. All right. So Vietnam, lots of good stuff there. It's a good problem to have. They're going to have to figure out to really optimize and take advantage of all the volume headed their way. Secondly, we've touched on, of course, healthcare supply chain as we're talking about the vaccine distribution. Our dear friend Tim Ingram, which I don't think is on the live stream with us today, we want to spotlight more about healthcare supply chain in 2021. But let's start here. So let's talk healthcare supply chain. A little tip of the hat there to Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. We all know the big gaps that the pandemic has unveiled within our medical supply chains. Here on the heels of Veterans Day, though, we find out that the Department of Veteran Affairs, we call here Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, is working on those gaps. Prior to the pandemic, it had already been working on 3D printing for medical manufacturing. So the shutdown was actually a huge shot in the arm as they had to focus on those efforts a lot more, not as a backup plan anymore. They're working on identifying what might be the next big shortage and then stockpiling digitally, which I love, to be ready to act. So That means designs, 3D printing parameters, and material specs, amongst other things. So they are really, the VA is to some degree on the cutting edge of the ever evolving medical supply chain, Greg and Jamin. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, quick comment, Greg. I know you're dying, and I know you're also dying to have a mask that looks like this beautiful 3D piece. Imagine being single and dating in this environment. You have your one hand behind your back, right?
What I love is people can't tell whether I'm smiling or frowning at them when I am out. I do love that. Right? You can appear much tougher if you accidentally run into somebody's grocery cart.
Yeah. That's right. So
yeah, I mean, I think all of these innovations are important, and as some of the comments in the stream are telling us, there's two sides to every story here, right? I mean, there are some limitations in Vietnam. Obviously, we're talking about yet another government and organization attempting to take the fore on something, which is always a challenge, to put it as nicely as I can.
Right.
But look, I think the important thing is people are looking and moving forward.
Yes. You're foreshadowing the final quick hit, but Jamin, I want to get you to weigh in before I move to that final one. Jamin, what do you, whether it's Vietnam or whether it's 3D printing and healthcare, what's the key takeaway?
Vietnam, love their attitude. I think that's a good example for all of us, and actually supports what we were talking about earlier, the attitude that global supply chain and logistics has of accepting those challenges with a nimble mentality. Hey, we're going to get this done. It's just the hows and the whats and whens, but hey, let's get after it. So I really appreciate that attitude and approach.
Agreed. And I'm hoping, and this might be over idealistic as well, as a veteran, and I've interacted a bit with the VA here and there, and had my medical records compromised, as I was informed a few years back. But look, they're a bunch of hardworking people that there's always opportunities in systems and systems thinking. There's opportunities for improvement in any organization. I'm really hoping that in the bigger picture, this represents a big shift of how they think, and it's not how it's always been done, but it's how can we serve the customer better, right? And hopefully there's some spillover effect, as the article here in Forbes points to. It's not just about the VA and serving veterans. They're expecting to be able to share a lot of these findings where to continue to move the needle when it comes to personalized medicine, where more consumers can benefit. So a lot of that is still to be seen for sure. All right, so I want to wrap on this. If I can get my mouse on the right monitor here. This is I was really excited to share this with our audience, Jamin and Greg. So Gary Smith is a great personal friend of mine, but also a great friend of the show. He's a wonderful, widely respected keynote influencer. He's been in supply chain for quite some time. He's a great thought leader. And he had his latest article picked up by Supply Chain Management Review. And I had a chance, thanks to Gary, to get a little sneak peek. And just disclaimer, Greg and Jamin, I'm not going to be able to do it justice in the couple minutes here, but it's called After the Coronavirus Dust Settles. And one of the central theses that Gary makes in this article up front is, quote, people are treating each other as human beings and being more kind to one another, end quote. Gary also shares what I love this quote from a recent New York Times column. Tom Friedman, stick with me here. Tom Friedman, Gary Smith is quoting Tom Friedman, who's quoting Dove Seidman, I believe, who said, quote, in my view, trust is the only legal performance enhancing drug. Whenever there is more trust in a company, country, or community, good things happen, end quote. Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
That is a great.
It's so true.
Huge accelerant, huge, undeniable, inarguable accelerant. So finally, one last point about this, I'll get Greg and Jamin to weigh in. Is in the article, and you have to check it out at Supply Chain Management Review. I think Amanda and Clay are going to put the link in the comments. He shares an 8-step plan that an organization needs to tackle to reach and maintain, of course, what we're all after these days, a resilient and agile state. And he references, of course, the supply chain maturity model from Gartner and a few other great tools. But as always, it's practical, it's educational, and it's uplifting, right? With a positive bend. So outstanding article there from our friend Gary Smith. Look forward to a future interview that Gary and Chris Barnes are going to be conducting. And who knows, he might just be appearing on a future episode of This Week in Business History. All right. So Greg, let's start with you.
Fine.
I know you, on that final, with some of those things we shared from Gary and just in general, give us a hot take here.
A couple things. One, trust. Yes. Emphatically, yes. And two, we treat each other a lot better than it is perceived, right? It is not in the press' best interest to show us treating each other well, because traditional press is dying, and they need clicks, and they need views to sell advertising. So the reporting has generally become hyperbolic around the world. But I mean, do you ever, who has ever walked up to somebody and punched them in the face, right? Or even shouted in their face? I mean, I know that happens because I too, Gary, have lived in New York. So, but even then it's short-lived, and it's kind of, but it's not, I think we're a lot better to one another than we're consistently told we are. And it's great to see people highlighting that, because I universally hear people say my day-to-day interactions are much more pleasant than they are represented in mass media, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So I'm glad to hear him uplifting that. I also love that here we are talking more about supply chain post-COVID. Hashtag COVID's over. I'm hoping that tag starts trending soon, right?
Me and you both. From your lips to God's ears, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Jamin, weigh in. What'd you hear there?
I really like the point about trust, just like you both highlighted. And to me, that can be the real power of culture. Now, not to diminish all the sides of culture in a company, but sometimes we could fall into the trap of making culture seem like a fluff type deal, a more just lip service. But if your culture is setting up a foundation of trust, now your folks can keep both eyes and attention and emotions on the work, the opportunities at hand, and less time on trying to feel each other out in the internal politics and on and on and on. So I think the point about trust is great, because it really can allow us all to go faster and be more agile when we're just focused on the problems and the opportunities, and not as much on each other in a negative light. And I love the point about practical, actionable suggestions and steps. Sometimes we can get too pie in the sky and real vague, but it's very nice and refreshing to have from a thought leader some real practical and actionable steps to pave the way.
Yeah. Wow. Jamin. I feel better just after hearing him the last couple minutes, Greg. So Gary, thanks for the great plug. Gary, it's really well deserved. You do so much for supply chain. You double down on mentoring and giving back and giving forward, and you're just you're a beacon in the industry, and it's great to see you get in your thought leadership get additional visibility, as it should. Keith Duckworth says, to build off what Scott said about Gary, people tend to come together when facing similar difficulties and challenges. Misery loves company. It is what is taught to all new recruits when they join the military. Good stuff there, Keith, from by way of Michigan, I believe. Keith, great to have you on the live stream. All right, so we're at the 1 o'clock hour. It's been a fast-moving hour of conversation, a few hot takes, no hot cakes, but we'll maybe next live stream we'll tackle that. So,
hey, it's
Greg,
still morning here on the West Coast. I should have lined up.
Got time for breakfast.
We have breakfast all day long here.
Yeah, that's right. Well, hey, y'all are making me hungry, and we're gonna have to grab a quick sandwich for the next call. But thank y'all both for joining us and sharing, some of the things that are front of mind for both of you as industry leaders, but also what's supply chain professionals, not only what they're tracking, but perhaps what they may be tracking. So I'm going to give you each here. I'm going to challenge, if you would, and Greg, I'll start with you. I want to wrap up this session with a challenge to our audience. Throw the gauntlet down. We had a great recording yesterday with a robotics leader, and you wrap that episode up with a wonderful challenge. So whatever is relevant to today's conversation, I'd like each of y'all to challenge the audience to do one thing. And Greg, we're going to put you on the spot because you always deliver, whether it's by surprise, spontaneity, or you name it. So Greg, you go first.
Assess carefully, analyze deeply, and act slowly. I think it's important for us, especially in these times when things are moving so fast, to think about things very carefully. As I said before, we're getting a lot of hyperbole. Assess that very carefully, right? Analyze deeply, meaning understand exactly what's being said, why it's being said, understand what's being done and why it's being done, right? And then, of course, act with wisdom. Don't rush. There's plenty of time. But if you understand things clearly, then your actions will be that much more effective. I know that's not specific to these topics, but we've talked about the fact that people are rushing to supply chain. Investors are rushing to supply chain. Supply chain companies, their value is rushing up, right? We've talked about new technologies. We've talked about potential new movements in transportation. We've talked about news and innovation in all aspects of the world. Even governments are starting to innovate. So really, it's important to kind of get within yourself and think carefully before you act.
Well said. As always, Greg. Jamin.
Love it. I'm going to say smile at every opportunity. What am I talking about? This is I really got thinking based off the trust and how, and what Greg was saying, we're masked up a lot. So when we have those safe, unmasked moments, smile and be cognizant of smiling, because we'll build trust, we'll lower our stress of people seeing our smile. And we as a global supply chain have a whole lot already on our plate, a whole lot more coming. So we're going to need every opportunity to trust one another, to have our stress levels go down. So let's just seize every opportunity to smile and get after it together. This is our time.
Love it. This is our time. Well said. All right, so I'm going to wrap with this, and I can't see Amanda and Clay if y'all could identify who this is, because this is a very real and very truthful comment. Personally,
we all recognize that, don't we?
That's right. You can feel the fluff versus real, authentic trust.
Totally.
And on that, and that comes to us. Oh, that's Rhonda Bumpensa.
Oh,
Zimmerman, I believe.
She knows so much about culture. She's an expert. She builds an authentic culture.
Well, Rhonda, we're gonna have to get you on a future show. But this is an outstanding comment. Really quick anecdote. We've all probably been a part of an organization. I remember one in particular where every single $3 decision required 5 different signatures, and that is trust. That's lack of trust illustrated, yes. Right? Illustrated. Yeah. And it stymies growth. It stymies innovation. It certainly sets cultural and alignment and unity and cohesion back. Don't be like that. Show trust, invest in trust. Of course, you're going to hire the right people. Trust them, right? Unbreak the chains. Let them fulfill the art of the possible. Don't require 17 signatures. So, Rhonda, I really appreciate you sharing this comment here. And on that note, the ultimate challenge we throw down every single time, because it's real, we try to live up to this. Thank you, Greg. Got to start here. Do good. Give forward. Be the change that's needed. Be like Jamin and Greg and so many of these folks in the comments. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Way to go, gents.